Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are so thrilled to welcome back to the show Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. We haven't been, I've been gone and you've been gone and been doing different things, so we haven't had you on the show for a while. If you're a new viewer, Dr. Tarbox is the Director of Autism Research Group. Is that the title?
Executive
Director.
Autism Research Group. Yep.
And you are also the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
That's
both
correct.
Really incredible things to have on a resume.
Oh, thank you.
But you've more than earned them because you're such a wealth of information. We've missed you, so grateful to have you back today and get a little bit of your time.
Good to be back.
Well, we've been talking about challenging behaviors all week long, and we've asked a bunch of questions and gotten a bunch of responses back from parents about what's most difficult, if they could change any behavior, and we've heard a lot of different things. But yesterday in particular, we asked all of you to write in about what's your hardest time of day, and does it happen to coincide, coincidentally, with challenging behavior from your child. And we had just a plethora of responses about different times of the day that are particularly hard. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit with you about those kinds of things. One of them that resoundingly people said morning, and the morning ritual and getting out the door and getting to school just about sinks everybody's battleship.
That's for sure. My house too.
And in mine, and in mine. So what kinds of things do we know having to do with research are effective in helping the morning time rituals?
Sure. Well, there's not a ton of research that I know of that has specifically addressed morning rituals as opposed to other times. But I think one of the reasons why the morning can be so difficult is because, let's face it, all effective behavior management comes down to us as the adults managing the consequences and the antecedents of the child's behavior effectively. So in other words, if the kid is misbehaving, then we need to be able to not give them what they want then, right? And so that means we have to be able to have the freedom to kind of do what we need to do to not give the kid what they want, right, when they're misbehaving. Well, during times like morning transitions, we don't have the freedom to do anything. We have to do what we need to do to get out the door, so we're not late for work, so our kids aren't late for school. And, we've got a laundry list of things that need to be accomplished before we get out the door. And quite frankly, most of us probably sleep in a little bit later than we should have, know, and so we're already pinched for time as it is. And so if your child starts acting out, we don't, physically have the time to follow through in the proper way, So what that ends up looking like is parents, and I include myself in this, taking all kinds of shortcuts because we need to get out the door. So if your kid says, no, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z, like, okay, let's brush your teeth, and instead of brushing his teeth for a minute like you should, maybe he does it for 5 seconds. And well, of course, the correct thing to do there would be to follow through. Well, no, you got to brush your teeth for a minute. We don't want your teeth to rot out. And so to follow through with that and to make sure that your child actually does it. But if you're trying to make a lunch, trying to change your baby's diaper, trying to, remember, what you need to bring to work and all that other stuff at the same time, you don't have time to stand there and follow through. Make sure
and your kid can't be late to school, and you can't be late to work, and your options diminish.
So it's no surprise then that what you see is parents end up kind of letting the kid get away with it. Or, maybe they don't let them get away with 5 seconds. Maybe they say, well, come on, just brush your teeth, and they do another 10 seconds, and then, okay, fine. But what you've done there is, instead of the whole minute or the whole 2 minutes like the child's supposed to do, you let them get away with, an 80% reduction in the work, right?
That sounds terrible.
Right? So basically what you're doing accidentally is reinforcing the misbehavior, about 80%. So, what can you do?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm going to ask it. What can you do? What can we do so that we're not doing that?
Well, this is going to sound stupid because I know that everyone's already thought of this, and everyone's going to say, well, I've already tried this.
But I always love it when you say the stuff that I call the stuff.
Yeah, well, and
it makes sense.
A lot of what ABA comes down to is common sense stuff that none of us have the common sense to actually follow through with. You know? So here it is. No one's going to like it. Wake up earlier. Just get out of bed earlier. If you know that there's going to be a 30-minute fight to get your kid dressed in the morning because it drives them nuts, or brushing teeth, or taking a bath, or whatever it's going to be, you got to wake up 30 minutes earlier and got to get going 30 minutes earlier so that you have the time to actually follow through in the way that you need to. And I don't mean to make this sound negative. It's not all just about following through and forcing a kid through misbehavior. It's also about reinforcing good behavior too.
Absolutely.
So if you've identified a particular reinforcer or a particular motivator or reward that you want your kid to work for, and it's really powerful, man, you better make sure your kid has the opportunity to get that when they perform really well, right? So if your kid snaps out of bed, brushes their teeth, does everything everything just like they're supposed to, eats dinner or eats breakfast with no fuss, and you go, great, perfect, I want to reward that, right? Well, if you have to run out the door, too late. So if you get up 10 minutes earlier, then okay, then you can have X, Y, and Z for 10 minutes before school.
Okay.
So again, just having the time to manage the consequences and to provide extra help if you need to is gonna, is gonna go a long ways. But I know it's kind of a no duh, like wake up earlier, no kidding.
Well, and when we can, but no, I appreciate it because it does put it in a certain light and goes, well, okay. But now, of course, I have questions because I'm thinking through some of the things that I do in the morning and going, where are you on the question of choosing your battles in the morning?
Right.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, or it depends on the thing?
Right. And the whole issue of choosing your battles is really interesting because it's one that's, I think, really misunderstood, but really, really important. And so people oftentimes think of choosing your battles as meaning sort of giving up or sort of not prioritizing something. Right. To me, that's not at all what it means. What it means is, there's two different ways to choose your battles. There's a good way and a bad way.
Okay. Let's see if I'm doing it the good way or the bad way.
Here's the good way. If you know that a particular circumstance is going to be problematic for your child,
right,
and you know that you don't have the time to deal with it appropriately in a particular context or at a particular time, don't let that circumstance happen. Okay. So, for example, if if you ask your child to eat a non-preferred food, let's say, for breakfast, and you know that's going to be problematic because they're really picky eaters, don't ask them to eat a non-preferred food for breakfast.
Right.
Target non-preferred foods when you have time to actually follow through.
Makes sense.
Lunchtime, dinner time. I'm not saying give up on picky eating, by no means. Target it twice as much, but do it during other times.
At an appropriate time.
Whereas, here's the wrong way to pick your battles. You give your child non-preferred food for breakfast. Maybe you even realize, oops, that was stupid, but you've done it now.
Right.
You said, here you go, you got to eat it. It's good for you, and your kid says no and throws the food. Now, at this point, what are you going to do? It's too late to pick your battles. You can't pick your battles now because picking your battles now just means reinforcing the misbehavior, and of course your kid's going to do it again tomorrow.
Okay.
So once the behavior has happened, and once the circumstance is such as it is, you got to follow through. You got to, manage the consequences in a meaningful way. Good consequences for good behavior, and no good consequences for misbehavior, right?
Okay.
And I don't mean bad consequences. I just mean you're not giving your kid what he wants if he's misbehaving. And so, and that's kind of just common sense, I know.
Yeah.
But it really is an issue of prevent the issue from occurring to begin with. That's a good way to pick your battles.
Okay.
Don't give up once the misbehaviors happen. That's the bad way to pick your battles. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. My question about, because this has actually come up in our family, because my mother was asking and saying, are you sure you're doing this right? And I'm like, no, I'm 100% sure we're doing this right. Now I'm not sure
Let's
if we're
go
doing
over
this
some
right.
more examples then.
Okay, because my son is completely capable of dressing himself. He totally can do that. And we've been working on fluency to do it a little bit faster on the weekends.
Great, perfect.
We don't work on that on school mornings.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a perfect example.
Okay.
And so in case your audience doesn't completely get why that matters so much, it's because if you're working on it and your child might even become frustrated and start to have some misbehavior or cry or whatever it is, if you're doing that in the morning when you're working on the morning routine and getting dressed, you don't have time to follow through. And even if he does really well, you don't have time to reward it. You got to just get to school, right?
Right. So let's see if I'm implementing it in the right way, though. Because on the weekends, we do a whole thing where I do a counting system and I say to him, how quick can you get dressed? If you can get dressed by the time I count to 20 and meet me down at the door with your shoes on and your teeth brushed and everything, whatever. I set the number, so that we're doing that on the weekend. But during weekdays, when I know that there's a whole bunch of other things and he moves slow in the morning, what I do is I say to him, and we discussed this a long time ago, this has been in place for a long time, is that I'll put something on that's educational for him to watch, and I literally say, let me dress you like a doll. And he doesn't have to do it at all. Now, my mother thinks this is horrible.
Right.
But there are other things that I want him to do quickly in the morning. I want him to eat faster than he does, because I know that has to happen and I can't do it for him.
Can't do it for him, yeah.
But I'm dressing him from head to toe, and while he watches the program. So not the best thing.
Well, okay, so you're sort of avoiding the issue a little bit by not having him get dressed. However, if you are working on it during on the weekends, and if you're making progress on it on the weekends, and if you have a plan for how to transition that progress down to weekday mornings.
That's where I don't have.
Okay,
that's
so
what
that's
I need
the
to work
important
on.
part, right.
Okay, and I could do that. I can do that. But no, I just go. I say to myself, let's get everything else.
Right.
This is something I actually can do for him. He can do it perfectly fine. If he couldn't on the weekends, I would be worried about it.
Right. So
But maybe I need to get him up a little bit earlier so that he can do it. And
So
maybe I
yes,
need to find the reinforcer and say to him the same kind of thing I do on the weekend and say, hey, today I'm going to have you do it, and give him a little bit more time than I do on the weekend.
Yeah, a little bit more time.
All right.
And if you're able to beat the clock, then you get X, Y, and Z. And make sure it's something that he can have right then, or that maybe it's appropriate for him to have during the car ride to school. Maybe it's a favorite book or workbook or cell phone, video game, whatever it is.
We always let him watch TV in the morning, but it always has to be educational. And every once in a while, he wants to work to watch something that isn't educational in nature.
Nothing
Same
wrong
amount.
with that, yeah.
So I could do that and
Nothing
say, if you can get dressed in 35 seconds, then you can watch SpongeBob as opposed to the Discovery Channel.
And one way that might be nice too, especially with morning routines, is to help the child sort of take some responsibility for their own behavior. And so you could do things like a kind of timer that he can operate. So they make timers that are made for children, like visual timers or a stopwatch with big buttons that's pretty easy to learn how to use.
So it's not me counting.
So it's not necessarily you counting. Yeah,
That's
as long as he's not going to cheat, you know.
Right. Well, I cheat sometimes. If I see he's struggling with something, I'll slow down a little bit because I want him to get to the reinforcement.
You want him to be successful.
Yeah, I help him cheat. It's a terrible thing, I admit it. Okay, but mostly we need to plan ahead, is what I'm hearing. We got to get up a little bit earlier. We got to plan ahead and be mindful.
And this is one of those situations where people sort of think like, I'm doing everything I can.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, that's true. We all are doing everything we can, but kind of not. I mean, our behavior can change. It doesn't feel like we can wake up any earlier, but if we had to, like let's say, we had to wake up an hour earlier to take care of our mother who had cancer or something like that, we'd be up.
Or get to our own chemo appointment.
Right, exactly.
We would make it happen.
No problem. We'd make it happen.
Okay, so it's prioritizing.
It's prioritizing, and it's kind of just taking a lot of the thinking out of it and saying, well, I could worry about this or think about this or complain about it, or here's the behavior that I know I need to do. Maybe I'll just try it. Maybe I'll just do it for a week, see what happens.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what folks find is if they just say, well, I guess I'm just going to do it for a week, it becomes routine, and it's not that much harder to wake up 20 minutes earlier.
And you know what I've found through working with you guys is that every time you asked me to do something that I said I don't have time for that, if I took the time for it, I ended up having more time because the behavior became better and I had more time to deal with things.
That's right.
I kind of, from time to time have been angry at you guys. They're like, no, I seriously don't have time. You don't understand. I'm an autism parent. I don't have time for this.
Right.
And then I end up having more time for it.
Well,
you guys are always right.
What's that saying about an ounce of prevention is worth whatever?
A pound of cure.
A pound of cure, yeah. And it's the same thing. It's like dealing with this challenge now and putting in a little bit of extra effort now is going to save me frustration for years to come. So even though it doesn't feel good in the moment, it doesn't feel like you can do it, it works.
It actually makes it easier. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and take on the transition time coming home from school. We heard from people coming home from school, from that time to dinner time ends up being a really difficult time. So we're going to ask Dr. Tarbox to talk to us about what things we can do about that period of the day.
Sounds good.
So stick with us. Welcome back. It's Friday here at Autism Live, and our special guest is the fabulous Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. I so enjoy the time we get to spend with you. And he is here today talking with us about challenging behavior. We asked all of you questions about what time of day was hardest for them and if it happened to coincide with when our children have their challenging behavior, because a lot of times it does.
No surprise, yes.
Yes. It was one of those things where you guys went, yeah. And a lot of you wrote in and said that the transition time between when you pick your child up from school to dinner time is really difficult because you're tired, you're pooped, you're on one schedule, and they've come home from school with a different agenda, and that it's a difficult transition time. And so I was wondering if you had any information about that. We just took on the morning time. Now help us with the afternoon time. What's our duh moment in the afternoon?
Well, somewhat similar, but the nice thing about the afternoon transition time is at least you have a little bit more time to work with, right? So you can follow through with requests that you make. You can follow through with rewards, reinforcers when your child does, give it the best shot. But the main thing I think for a lot of folks on the spectrum is having sort of predictability and having some kind of structure. And actually that's not just for the kids, it's for us too, because it kind of helps us remember what's important and what to do and what to follow through with. But if your child has a predictable routine, so I get home from school, have a snack maybe, then it's time for homework, then when homework's done, then I go outside and play, or I get, TV or video games or whatever it is in your home. I think that can go a really long way. Not to say that we all, we don't want to teach our kids to be rigid, like they always have to have the same routine. We certainly don't want to encourage that. But for a lot of kids, predictability and structure is helpful.
Yeah.
And it's helpful for us to just keep us on track of what we need to get done and when, more or less, So,
Absolutely.
I mean, that would be the first thing, is just have a predictable structure. Try to get home more or less at the same time, and go through more or less the same routine of homework and everything else. And have, I think, clear expectations too. So sort of almost like classroom rules, but house rules. So, you're expected to do your homework, try hard with a good attitude, try hard by yourself first. If you need help, ask for help, etc. And of course, this will all have to be adjusted depending on the language abilities of your child and all that. But yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And since you brought up the word structure, one of the things that I hear from parents a lot is that they'll say, well, my child does, it's one or the other. My child does really well at school, but then they come home and they fall apart. Or that my child does really well at home and then they go to school and they fall apart. And one of the things that I hear discussed a lot is, what's the structure in those two different things? Because if they're in a really highly structured environment at school, we often hear the parent saying, that's when they do really well, and they've had so much structure at school that they come home and I feel like I should give them some free time. Every child deserves to have some free time.
Sure, and that's of course true.
But we can structure the free time.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, having some free time and giving your child a break because they work so hard at school doesn't mean just the run of the house all evening. It means, a reasonable amount of free time.
Right.
And quite frankly, a short break right when your child gets home from school is totally appropriate.
Right.
A snack is certainly appropriate if they're hungry.
Right.
But, homework is the order of the day. You got to do it. And, treating a child just because they have autism any differently than you would a typically developing child with regards to homework doesn't make any sense. If you got homework, you got to do it. You know? So get that done first. It doesn't make a lot of sense to give big treats or huge breaks or lots of fun before homework, right? And we know why, because we want to motivate the child to work hard and get the homework done and not dilly-dally.
But I love the idea of giving a little break. That was something that I had shared recently, that my son has been appropriately asking for the break before homework, and I was really reticent because I thought we're never going to get down to it, but actually he got down to it much quicker because there was a little break. But we just started 4th grade, and can I just tell you how much more homework? I'm shocked.
Great. My son starts, he just started too. Yeah, it's a little bit of a change.
It's like, the amount of homework with 4th grade. And I have a friend who, her son was in 6th grade last year, and she said, oh, Shannon, just get ready. The sea that's coming, the storm that's coming, the tsunami. And I can't even believe how much more homework it is.
Wow.
Yes, I have a little pause for how much more homework it is. But what's interesting is that we're about a week in, and the first day I felt like, oh man, maybe I should be asking for little. And I said, no, let's just see. Let's just see how it goes. And last night we had the most pleasurable homework experience I think we've ever had.
That's great.
I'm hoping, I'm hanging my fingernails, hoping that that's how it's going to be. And I reinforced a lot and said how awesome it was, because it was so great, and because I'd like to see more of that.
Right, absolutely. And so was he able to actually have some fun during homework?
Yeah, we did. We had fun together, and one of the assignments was really, really fun too. We have a great teacher. I don't know how I got so lucky this year, but the assignment that was all week long, we had things happening all week long, but the big assignment that they had to plan for, because he's a planner this year, which I just love, and he has to check off that he did the assignment. So all week long he had to do a little bit of work on, it's called a paper bag story assignment, and all the kids got the same big paper bag, and they had to put 5 items in it and write a sentence about what the item has to do with themselves to present to the class today.
Wow, very cool.
And he at first did not want to do it, but had a great deal of fun with it, because there are Legos in the bag, and there's a robot remote control in the bag, and and a spaceship in the bag, so it's everything that he finds
very cool that he likes.
Yeah. So I digress. I always make it about me and my kid. How do I make that happen? In any case.
One more thing I want to say about homework, though, is, people oftentimes get this false impression of ABA that it's just all about like being a drill sergeant and making kids do stuff and all that. But that's, of course, as we know, completely wrong. And ABA is all about positive reinforcement. And so, probably the best thing you can do for your kids' homework is to try to make it fun and to try to remove nagging from the equation. So if you find yourself nagging your kid, then okay, that's
guilty as charged.
Right. Well, and again, me too. We all are, right?
All right.
But that's a cue for us as parents to say, oh, okay, hang on now. I need to take a step back. I need to. There's a few things I can do to make this situation more fun for my kid, and decrease my nagging, and therefore make it more fun for me too.
Yeah.
So a couple things. One is how difficult is the homework, right? So if the problems or the tasks that your child is trying to solve, if it's overly challenging and they genuinely need help, then I would get in there sooner rather than later to help them, to provide the help that they need so that they can be successful quickly and easily. If that's not the problem, if it's just kind of a problem of motivation, like for example, it's honestly boring work, then you're going to need to use more positive reinforcement. Maybe, that could be in the form of just praise and just, being there with your child to help them, or not help them necessarily, but to do it with them and to give them attention while they do it. Or it could be in the form of more contrived reinforcers, like a little bit extra TV time or, whatever it is. Do this first, then you get to go outside and ride your bike or, whatever it is. But it's important to make it, to build sort of reinforcement and fun around the whole sort of homework interaction. It's not a task where you're the taskmaster and the kid has to do it. I mean, that is the truth actually, but you don't, that's the goal is to not make it feel like that. The goal is to make it genuinely fun, not sort of fakey fake, like, oh, great job, but like actually fun, like actually try to have some fun.
Well, you know what? What just clicked for me, because when you said a lot of people think that ABA is this, drill sergeant kind of thing, and I was thinking, no, I try to think of it more as a clown car. What can I pull out of the clown car?
Great,
But I'm not applying that to the homework, and you just made me realize that. But I'm not applying the clown car.
Nobody is enough. That's why we have discussions like this to try to give us all a reminder. Like,
but last night was fun, and it was fun for me, and it was fun for him.
There you go.
So I need to apply the clown car to the homework. That's something for me to think on.
And it's amazing. As a parent, it's so easy to nag. It's so natural to nag, and it's so natural to become frustrated. Especially if your kid is misbehaving. But that doesn't help the situation. What helps is managing the consequences in a neutral but effective way. So, getting mad doesn't help. Giving a consequence that's meaningful helps. So if your kid just did something great, give them a great consequence that's meaningful. If they're misbehaving, getting mad doesn't help. Just follow through with whatever the routine is. Whatever it needs to be, that's what it needs to be. Sorry, you're mad, you still have to do your homework.
Right.
It's not a big deal. Let's just continue.
Right.
And so I think that, and frankly, it just makes it nicer for the parent.
Absolutely.
To sort of kind of try to remove some of the naggy, emotional, sort of anger, frustration type business. None of that you're experiencing as a parent is helpful to you or to the kid.
Right.
So,
it doesn't get
easier said than done. But,
yes. I mean, and I talk a lot here about that, that's my go-to. I think, it is in my DNA to nag. It's my birthright. It's what it is. I digress. But anyway, okay, so we're moving through our day and talking about the different transition times. The next one, of course, was dinner time. The people were saying that dinner, and I know for those of us with kids on the autism spectrum, sometimes it's that there are different meals and there's different preferences, and there's children who won't eat these colors or won't eat these textures. And it's a hard time for the parents because you're trying to, everybody's thinking about money these days. You've spent money on the food, then you had to prepare it, which probably, unless you're a chef, was the last thing you wanted to do when you came home from work. And then you put it in front of the child, and there's the fear of, are they going to eat? Did we waste the money? Is my child okay? It's an emotional time.
It is, and we have all of these preconceived notions of what a family dinner is supposed to look like.
Oh, it is supposed to be a Norman Rockwell where you showed up with the turkey and everybody's happy and you look wonderful.
It doesn't include the kid not appreciating, not wanting to eat it, being a punk. It doesn't include you being frustrated, mad, tired, sad, depressed.
Or how much money was spent on the food, or the phone ringing and the phone beeping and
So my first recommendation with all of that is is kind of like a how's that working out for you type thing, with like, okay, you feel frustrated. This is not what you wanted, this is different from how you thought dinner was supposed to be in your family.
Yeah.
Okay, how's that working out for you? Like feeling that frustration and feeling the frustration, you can't avoid that. But harping on it and obsessing on it and thinking about it and trying to make reality into something that it isn't, none of that's helpful,
So acknowledge the disappointment.
It is what it is.
And then look at what you can do.
Right, exactly.
What's within your control.
Exactly. And it turns out there's a lot that you can do if you're willing to let go of, trying to force it to be the way that it should be, or forget should or would or whatever.
So if we let go of that, let go of the expectation. I have a friend who says that expectation is planned resentment. I love that.
That's great. I've never heard that.
So you let go of that. And then what is within our control? What can we do?
Well, and it does kind of go back to ABA common sense type stuff, but you want to set your kid up for success. So whatever the goal is, so here's something that you might think. My kid should eat their dinner because I worked really hard on it and because it's healthy, and they should know that I told them they have to eat it, so they should just do it, right? Forget the should. The fact is, if your kid's a picky eater and they're not eating it, they're not eating it. So it doesn't matter if they should, it doesn't matter if they should appreciate you or anything else, they're not.
Okay.
So if that matters to you to make a difference in that and to make some progress, then what you can do is pick a small achievable goal. So let's say today my kid's not eating any vegetables at all. One small achievable goal might be, tonight my kid will eat 1/4 of one bite of broccoli.
All right.
Okay. And how do we get the kid to do that? Well, we know, make the expectations clear, set some rules, and make a clear, meaningful consequence based on that. Okay. So if you eat 1/4 of one bite of broccoli, then you get X, Y, and Z, whatever the X,
and
Y,
I want to
Z
go
is.
back and point out what you just said, that the clear consequences are a reward, not a punishment.
Sorry, right. Everyone thinks consequence has a negative
I think that you always think in terms of that, but we always think.
Well, yeah, the culture, the consequence means bad. Yeah. Right. So what I meant, let me be clear. What I meant was reinforcement. And so, the easiest one to do is something your grandmother probably would have done, which is you're not getting dessert unless you eat your vegetables.
Right.
But again, if you start with the whole plate of vegetables, that's going to be a huge fight. It might still work, but it's going to be a huge fight, and it's putting a big expectation, a huge behavior change. Better to start with 1/4 of one bite. You eat 1/4 of one bite of broccoli, and you get dessert. As long as you're not, having a tantrum and everything else.
Right. And what I love about that too is because if you say eat the whole plate in order to get the dessert, like you said, you might get it that day, but you'll be starting at square zero the next day. It's not like they're going to be more likely to eat the broccoli the next day.
And it's possible that your kid could wait you out for 3 hours first, and then finally eat the whole plate.
And then you're a Joan Crawford movie.
Yeah.
That's what you are. And who wants to do that, right?
Yeah. So, pick a baby step, a small achievable goal that will make you feel good and like you've accomplished something.
Okay.
And start with that. If it works, great. Do the same thing again the next day. Don't even try to bite off anymore.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Yeah. But a good one, I might add.
And then, the following day after that, if it still works, now it's maybe half a bite of vegetables. Great. If that's working, the next day a bite, etc. Baby steps.
And also when we're reinforcing in that time, we're just reinforcing and not adding in that little nag thing, but, see, it wasn't that bad. It's not that, the broccoli is
not going to help.
So just reinforcing that they ate that little bit.
If you want to model like positive verbal behavior and positive thinking and talking about the behavior that matters, that's fine, but not naggy. You're right. So you might say something like, I love my vegetables. I love broccoli. It makes me strong. It gives me big muscles.
There you go.
And don't make your kid say it. You can just model it, and it's amazing as adults how much complaining we do in the course of our day-to-day lives that we don't even notice. And of course, cutting some of that out can be helpful too. So
we're getting questions. It's not that I'm not listening to you. It's just that Emily told me that we have, and I hadn't scrolled down. I'd be interested in hearing everyone's usual reinforcer and if there's a commonality with male versus male in ages. For example, my child will do anything for me if I let him have 15 minutes of free time on the laptop. I do set a timer. I've taught him, so much with that reinforcer. I don't know what I'd do without that laptop reward. And I think that that's an awesome thing. It isn't going to be what's great for everybody, but what an awesome thing to be able to have that, because when you have a reinforcer that works,
that's amazing. Yeah.
It's a powerful thing.
And that's a great comment. And of course, it is going to be different for every child, and it may well be different for male versus female children. But the gender doesn't really matter as long as it's something that really motivates your child and something that's easy for you to give and remove, and something easy for you to limit access to, so that the kid isn't just having it constantly all the time. But yeah, laptop, iPads are a huge thing now. There's video games that you can get your kids that are at least a little bit educational, you know what I mean, but they're still fun.
Absolutely. And she goes on to say that her the child, I don't want to assume it's a her that's saying it, but the child is 10 years old, third grader in mainstream with an aide. And, you know, I've got a child that's, you know, in that same age range too, who's very interested in computer stuff too. But he's also very interested in video games. And so I do try to vary it up and sort of take a preference assessment with him on a given day about, you know, do you want computer time, or do you want to be on your DS, or do you want to be on the game system, or we even have a token economy that he goes to school with, that every morning he gets to pick the thing that he's working for, and one of them is video games, but one of them is a play date, one of them is swimming, one of them is points towards something else. You know, so we try to vary it up because that's how he is. If the computer thing works and the 15-minute works continuously, I imagine that there's different things on the computer, so that can be a variation. We just don't want to have the same reinforcer
the same thing over and over.
And over and over. So encouraging different games on the computer, because you don't want to burn something out.
Absolutely. And also you don't want to encourage your kid to be too obsessed with one particular topic. So if there is a way to sort of find variations on a particular theme. So if, you know, if your kid likes geography, well, there's a lot of different ways to interact with geography. Maybe video games related to it, books related to it, maps, atlases, you know, stories that are, you know, historical fiction that take place in different countries. So the idea is, you know, do try to include as much variety in reinforcers and rewards as possible. But sticking with a theme, we actually did some research in our Phoenix office showing that including novel or new items that the kid had no contact with at all, but were a variation on the same theme that we know the kid liked, actually worked better than the thing that we thought the kid normally liked, right? So in this case, kind of like the laptop, we had something that we know worked all the time, constantly. It was a huge reinforcer, really effective, but bringing in something new related to the same theme. So like, for example, a Thomas book as opposed to a Thomas puzzle or something like that actually worked better for a lot of kids. So very
interesting.
important.
So an iPad or something like that in place of the computer, or just different games.
Or different games on the computer.
Or different programs, or searching on the internet, or something along those lines.
Exactly.
Really, really interesting. But our kids are all different.
Everyone's different.
The things that they, and we're different too.
Absolutely.
I mean, the things that we like, absolutely
and people's
different.
preferences change over time, and that's the same thing with you or I, or with the child on the spectrum.
Right. We get bored with stuff after a while. So really, really interesting. But I love it when somebody has found something that works, because man, that's when you know you can cover ground.
That's right.
When you know you've got something that is the be-all, end-all for them. It's like, how far can I run with this? So I love that, and I love that you've got the timer. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay, and so we talked a lot yesterday with Angela Persicki about bedtime, and we talked about a bedtime pass with that. So I don't necessarily want to talk about that, but what I'm hearing a lot from parents too in terms of challenging behavior, I have to be honest about this, is disheartening to me that a lot of people are still not understanding what an FBA is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that it's, you know, this sort of hazy thing that people are going, I just don't understand, and why is this important to me? Why should I know what this is? So could you give us a really quick rundown before we have to release you to what an FBA is? I know, I've given you like, you know, 2 minutes, the 2-minute explanation of what an FBA is and why it's something really important to a parent.
Okay, sure. So, you know, historically, in our culture, and probably every culture, when someone misbehaves, we've got a whole litany of reasons, a whole litany of explanations, right? A whole bunch of stories, basically, that people have made up that supposedly explain why the kid does it. And so the default
explanations... Or why the adult, or why anybody does it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the default explanations for most people are to blame the child or to blame the parent. So, oh, he does that because he has autism, or he does that because he has intellectual disability, or because he has ADHD, or whatever it is. Turns out...
Or the parents aren't being strict enough.
Right, yeah. Or the parent, or the mom's, you know, too busy at work to spend time with the kids, or you name it, you know, there's a million and one crazy explanations. The fact of the matter is, there's been a lot of good quality scientific research on challenging behavior by kids on the autism spectrum and adults, and you know, probably 95% of the research has shown it actually comes down to some very basic explanations. Almost all challenging behaviors occur either to get attention, to get escape out of something the kid doesn't want to do, to get access to something the kid wants to have, usually a preferred item or activity or toy or food. Or there's a little bit of research to show some problem behavior occurs because the kid wants to be in control of the situation, sort of the bossy function of behavior. And sometimes it's in order for the child to get access to whatever obsession or routine or ritual they want. So a kid might have a tantrum if you don't let him line things up in the way that he wants to. But it's a short list of reasons, and none of these reasons have anything to do with the diagnosis, and none of these reasons have anything to do with IQ or the brain or anything else. It's stuff that's happening in the environment that encourages the behavior to continue to occur. And so, again, for 95% of folks on the spectrum, the reason why they're engaging in challenging behaviors is because it gets them something they want. And so in ABA terminology, that's called the function of the behavior.
Right.
The function is what you're getting, what you want that you're getting by using the behavior.
And in Dr. Phil, he refers to it as the paycheck.
There you go.
What's the paycheck for what you're doing?
There you go.
And people say, I have no paycheck for it, and he goes, I don't believe you.
There's always something.
There's always something. There's a reason you're getting something for it.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so you can come up with 1,000,001 explanations if you want to, but at the end of the day, research is clear. There's a very few a short list of explanations that 95% of the time, that's it. It's one of those reasons. Now, what an FBA is a procedure that's designed to figure out which of those reasons is causing your child's challenging behavior. And sometimes it's not just one of those. It could be 2 or 3 of those, 4 or 5 different reasons. So the FBA is a procedure that's implemented by professionals who are hopefully experts trained in conducting functional behavioral assessments. And it's a process that can take several hours up to several days or a week or 2. And basically it tells you, okay, here's the reason why your kid is having tantrums. He's trying to escape from work, or he's trying to escape from academic tasks, or here's the reason why your child is making inappropriate jokes in class. It's to get attention from peers.
Right.
But it's critical, because if you don't identify the real reason in the environment, meaning something that you or I have control over, or that the teacher has control over, if we don't identify what's happening in the environment that's encouraging that behavior to continue, then we can't change those things that are happening in the environment to stop that behavior from continuing.
Right.
It really is pretty much common sense. It's what reward is the kid getting out of the environment for doing the behavior. And it's 9 times out of 10, or probably 99 times out of 100, it's not something that people are aware of. If they were aware of it, they'd stop doing it.
Right.
It's not like someone saying, "Oh, good job hitting yourself," or "Good job hitting your peer," right? It's not like that.
Right.
It's just inadvertent attention, or it's inadvertent letting the kid have a short break from something they don't want to do.
Right.
So yeah, it's absolutely critical.
And I think that the component of it that we're all missing, because it's not being implemented enough in our lives, is that if we had the FBA, then we could create a behavior intervention plan that's effective, and we could change the behavior.
Absolutely.
That's the progression of how that happens. And so for the thing that I want you guys to know at home, as we've been talking all week long about challenging behavior, whatever it is that you're dealing with, it can be changed.
Absolutely.
But that's the progression. You get the FBA, then you have the intervention plan, and you have to follow through it.
Right.
But I think so often what happens is that people see the behavior and they skip the part where they diagnose what's the function and go, well, here's what the intervention I'm going to put.
Let's just try this intervention.
Yeah, let's just try this. Well, this is what my mom did, or this is what my grandmother did, or my sister Becky did, whatever, did, and then it doesn't work and leads to more frustration, and maybe the behavior gets worse.
Right.
And people say, well, it's just the autism.
Right, exactly.
We need to make peace with this. This is my life. I'm not going to be able to change this.
Yeah, and a lot of these not helpful explanations come from a good place. Like, for example, just empathy is one. So, for example, if your kid's really frustrated because he doesn't know how to communicate, that makes you feel bad, right?
Yes.
Obviously, it should. If it doesn't, there'd be an issue,
Right.
And it's going to make your kid's teacher feel bad too, right?
Right.
And so, of course, you say, well, he's so frustrated, we can't blame him for being upset and all that stuff. All of that stuff is true, but that still doesn't make the behavior go away. And it still doesn't help your child learn something better that will replace the behavior that he or she can be more successful and actually get what they want, and by being more successful. So, it really comes down to a whole bunch of, kind of myths that we have and expectations. And, oh, it should be this or it should be that, or I think it's this, forget all that.
Yeah.
There's decades of research that say, here's the progression. You want to fix the behavior, here's the formula. It works 99 times out of 100.
Right.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do anything really fancy or really smart. You don't have to come up with any new theories.
Right.
Just follow this progression. People in ABA have been doing it for decades. It's pretty straightforward.
But it feels a little bit like the Matrix, because there are people who get that and then there's everybody else, and sometimes once it's been explained to you and you go, okay, but you go back to your regular life where people aren't implementing, and it's very frustrating. You know, a teacher sends home a note and says, you know, Rebecca is biting people, and there's this feeling of, well, the parent is supposed to do something about that, right?
Yeah,
that, oh, well, okay, we'll do something, we'll get right on that. Or you're going to lose your placement in school, when what really needs to happen is that an FBA needs to be done. And unfortunately, in the United States, what that means is the parent has to ask for the FBA. We don't see the teachers asking for them. We don't see the administrators coming in and saying, well, sending home the note to the parent saying, your child is biting, so we're going to refer you to this person who's going to be doing an FBA in the classroom. It doesn't work that way.
Well, that's funny, because there's nothing in federal law that says the parents are the ones that should be initiating the process.
Exactly.
You have a right to, but it's not like it shouldn't be your responsibility.
But I don't think there are enough people in the schools that understand this progression of, let's do the FBA, there'll be a BIP, and
it'll work.
And then it will work, and the behavior will change, and everybody will be happy, happy, happy. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted Dr. Tarbox to explain it to you guys in a way that you would get, because it is your right as a parent.
That's right.
And if you are a teacher in the classroom, and I've talked to a lot of teachers lately who did not know that they could ask. They didn't even know they could.
Yeah, and
you can ask for an FBA to be done on a child.
You know, let's face it, what's more frustrating for you as a teacher than challenging behavior that disrupts the whole class,
oh
right?
My goodness. And the teachers want the change, but they do not know that that is the language. You can ask for an FBA. And the FBA to be done on the child, and that you be given a behavior intervention plan so that you can change the behavior.
That's right.
So that's why we all need to get to know this term and understand what it is and make friends with it, because it's the difference between us having true success with challenging behaviors or just being frustrated.
That's right. And you know, I have to say, because I do a lot of consulting work in schools, and and you know, it's very commonplace for me to go and visit a kid, observe a kid in a classroom, and it's been years that the kid has been doing the same exact behavior. And if you look back in his record, either there's no FBAs, or they were done very poorly by people who had no training, you know, who were just following some manual or something, but had no real training at all. And you know, the kid, you find, oh, okay, it's real clear. This is for escape. All we have to do is teach the kid to ask for a break, teach the kid to ask for help, and then give him positive reinforcement when he does the work. That works. And don't give him escape.
And how quickly does it work?
Quickly. I mean, you see a difference in 1 week. If you really nail the function and you're doing the BIP with good integrity, you see a difference in 1 week. You know? And so it's like, wow, okay, this kid had challenging behavior for the last couple of years. Think about how much that impacted his learning, not to mention the learning of the other kids in his class.
Absolutely.
And all we needed was an effective behavior intervention plan.
And it's not just at school, because it's at home as well. So if you're seeing challenging behavior in your home, you have the ability to ask for an FBA as well. Whether you already have, you've already started ABA, you've got your provider in your home, and you can say, hey, this is this behavior. Make sure you're talking to your supervisors.
Absolutely.
If you don't already have ABA in your home, you can contact a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and say, we need an FBA. That does not mean that you have to then transition into a 40-hour-a-week ABA program.
No, not at all.
You can just have an FBA on a single behavior, and have them come in and say, here's what we want you to do for this behavior.
Absolutely.
And your life can change.
And one thing I like to say on your show every time we talk about problem behavior is challenging behavior is not part of the autism diagnosis.
And I so appreciate you saying that.
Not part of autism. It's something that many people with autism learn to do, and it can be unlearned.
Right. And it makes sense a lot of the times why they're doing what they're doing, because they don't have another way of communicating. And of course,
it makes sense every time. They're not stupid. They're not doing it for no reason.
Right.
You know, it gets them something.
But we don't know that. You know that, but we don't always know that. And the other thing that I want to say is that in that behavior intervention plan, a lot of times, you know, what we're going to see is that they're going to build into it functional communication so that the child doesn't have to engage in the behavior, that there's some way that they can communicate the thing that they wanted so that they don't have to do it.
That's exactly right. And so functional communication training is probably considered the gold standard of behavior intervention procedures these days, because it decreases the challenging behavior, it replaces it with a more appropriate behavior, communication, it increases the independence of the child, because now they can ask for what they want instead of depending on others, and it's the least intrusive treatment possible, because you're not, you know, you don't need to use any negative consequences. In the vast majority of cases, just teaching a child to ask for what they want and no longer giving them what they want when they misbehave So there's two pieces. Teach a child to ask for what they want,
Right.
and when they ask, give it to them.
Right.
And then,
Which is hard sometimes,
it is,
but we
you
can
gotta
make
do
it happen.
Yeah. And then the other piece is no longer give them what they want when they misbehave.
Right.
That's it. I mean, you know, unfortunately, you really can distill probably 30 years of research into those two statements. It's the most important thing to know. If you want to know one thing about challenging behavior of your child, whether it's at home or in the school, that's it.
Yeah, and I think that's super duper important. We talk all the time though about, and you were just saying earlier that sometimes you don't realize that you're rewarding the negative behavior that happens.
You very rarely realize it. If you realize it, you probably stop.
Yeah, but we don't put it together. It's easy to see in other people, but we don't put it together. I always talk about when my son was engaged in self-injurious behavior and would hit his head against the kitchen floor, I would be the mother who would run screaming across and pick him up off the kitchen floor and rub his head and sing to him and rock him and give him some juice and sit in the chair and have this lovely, fabulous, nurturing moment because he hit his head on the floor. And I honestly could not see that he was hitting his head on the floor so that would happen.
Right.
That I would then give him all of that love and attention. I didn't get it.
Well, and it's not very common. You know, you don't see that a lot, and so how would you get it? You know, that didn't.
Thank you, because I always think, what was wrong with me that I didn't see that? But
why would you get that?
But
it's
when
not like you bought a parenting manual at Barnes and Noble that said, oh, by the way, if your kid hits your head on the floor or hits his head on the floor, it might be because he wants your attention and juice and to snuggle. I mean, right? It's pretty different from what we would expect as parents. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of research to show that very exact same problem behavior happens for that exact reason a lot.
Yeah. And in the moment when I did realize it, it was because Ryan Bergstrom was in my house and said, no, you're not going to do that. He's somebody who works here as well, and this was many years ago, and he said, no, we're going to handle this in a different way. And it was an amazing moment in my life, huge shift in my life, really difficult, good 20 minutes, 30 minutes that he, stayed with me, this therapist, and kept talking in my ear and said, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it, and this is why. And
the reason why so much of this is so difficult for us as parents is because it violates narratives that we have, ongoing narratives that we have about what is supposed to be, So of course a good mother would comfort her son when he hit his head.
That was what was going on,
right? Like you'd have to be an awful mother to not care for your son when he hurt himself, right?
Exactly.
And so it turns out that with kids on the spectrum and severe behavior, what makes good or effective or good parenting or whatever is different from what we expected, and different from what comes naturally to us. And so, it turns out maybe all of that care and attention that you wanted to give him, you're still going to give. You're not going to give it, but you're just not going to give it as a consequence for the behavior. You're going to give it before the behavior happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to continue to talk here, but I'm going to ask, because we're down to the last 2 minutes here, I'm going to ask Emily to cycle through the ways that you can get a hold of us, because as the show ends, the conversation continues. So take a look at the ways you can get a hold of us. I want to remind you, we're not going to be here on Monday. We'll be here on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we have people from Paper Clouds Apparel who are going to be here with us. That they have a clothing company that is especially it raises money for autism charities, and it's specially designed to be sensory friendly. So we're going to be joined by them to talk about what they have going on and how they're raising some money. But anything that you want to let people know about Autism Research Group as we wind down to an end?
Please check us out, www.autismresearchgroup.org. It's our nonprofit research institute dedicated to doing research that makes a real life in the difference of families of kids on the spectrum. As well as we have a number of sort of community outreach things we're doing, barbecue in the park, roller skating events, different types of conferences, parent training. We're putting together a sibling sort of like buddy system. So there's all kinds of good stuff there. Lots of good information too for parents on research and things like that.
Are you still doing surveys about what kinds of things people want researched?
Absolutely. We want to hear from parents. We want to hear from you what kind of research you think matters the most in terms of research on autism. And so we have a survey that's on our website, and we highly encourage parents to take it.
And have you been able to take any of their suggestions already and implement? Okay, interesting.
No surprise. There's probably 200 different parents have taken the survey so far, and there's been about 200 different responses.
Really? They've all been different?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to narrow it down, but it's given us a lot of good ideas.
Okay, awesome.
But if there's one common thread, it's do something that really helps.
Yes,
and so
absolutely.
that's kind of what we were expecting going into it, and it
business of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, we appreciate all of your time here and all the things
Thanks a lot.
that you
It's
do.
always fun.
And you make it fun. You always make it reinforcing for me when you're here.